This is RTV 6 News at 5:30, working for you.
And now at 5:30, safety in the water. Too many people have drowned already this summer in Indiana. Well, you need to remember to stay safe. And at one point, it looked as if Indiana Beach wouldn't be open this summer, but that all changes tomorrow. What you need to know if you're planning to go. Usher.
Here's what we're talking about on this Friday in our lineup. Where will the next hotspot be? Can we predict that? We're talking to the researchers trying to look into the future. Plus, the closure of government offices is causing problems for people trying to get stimulus checks. How IRS workers going remote is impacting you and what you can do to get answers. And people are setting off more fireworks than usual this year. Experts gave us a unique explanation for the increase.
And first at 5:30, 9 people have drowned in Indiana in the past 12 days. Several of those drownings happening while people were swimming in local waterways. Our Alyssa Donovan explains what officials want you to do to stay safe around water this summer.
Accidents on lakes and rivers can happen when you're swimming or boating, which is why it's so important to have a plan before you even head out on the waterways.
It doesn't take much for people to get into a hazardous situation and then put themselves in danger.
Which is why it's best to plan ahead.
Whether it's a lake or a river where they're doing kayaking or boating, it's just knowing what the hazards are so they can prepare for those. We have our high hazard areas with the low head dams, on Williams Creek and on Broad Ripple on the White River. However, these accidents can happen anywhere. That's why you always have to be paying attention and be vigilant with your actions.
When it comes to kayaking or tubing, make sure you have the proper protective equipment.
PFDs or life jackets are critical.
As for swimming, be sure you're competent with the natural environment. It's not the same as your backyard pool. And keep an eye out for currents and waves and underwater obstructions.
Always paying attention because it's very easy to get distracted in a conversation, and it doesn't take long for someone to put themselves in a bad situation.
While boating and hanging out at the lake is often associated with alcohol, law enforcement says you really need to limit your consumption when you're around water, especially when driving a boat. The same rules apply on the road as they do on the water when it comes to drunk driving. I'm Alyssa Donovan, RTV 6.
Alyssa, thanks. And if you prefer to enjoy the water in a city pool, Indy Parks has 5 pools open this summer with social distancing and safety rules in place. They are Bethel, Frederick, Douglas, Perry, Riverside, and Willard Parks. They are open 6 days a week at 50% capacity. The hours are Tuesday through Sunday from 10 a.m. to noon, 1:30 to 3:30, and 5 to 7. They are cleaned multiple times a day. Pool spray features and park spray grounds are not available. Kevin, I could not get through that.
Don't you worry. Well, let's talk about our changes that are underway. You feel the humidity. We're all familiar with 4-H in Indiana. I like to add a 5th H every once in a while, and that's humidity. You can see some haze in the air. Head, heart, health, and hands, right? And then you add humidity. That's the 5th H. All right, it's dry in central Indiana now. Likely to stay that way for the next several hours. I think the most likely time will be while you're sleeping or first thing tomorrow morning that we inherit thunderstorms from the north. And thunderstorm chances increase overnight from north to south. And again, they should be losing strength as they roll in. Temperatures 89 in Indy right now, 90 in Bloomington. It is steamy everywhere, so it feels like 90 degrees or a little warmer because of the humidity. Let's show the timeline. 11 o'clock tonight, thunderstorms northwest Indiana, slowly moving to the south. There they are at 2 o'clock in the morning, arriving in the metro area, sliding southeast from there. And sure bet they'll redevelop during the day tomorrow. We'll talk about your Saturday forecast and the timing of storms coming up.
The U.S. continues a disturbing trend in new coronavirus infections. On Thursday, there were more than 39,000 new cases reported, a single-day record. That's according to Johns Hopkins University. The previous record was on April 24th. At least 30 states are reporting an increase in cases as compared to the previous week. The race continues for a COVID-19 vaccine. More than a dozen possible vaccines are in various testing stages around the world. Here in the U.S., biotech company Moderna is preparing for phase 3 trials of the vaccine it's developed, with 30,000 people taking part next month. The U.S. is stockpiling millions of doses of different vaccines under development, hoping at least some of them will prove to be safe and effective. Immunization registries are also preparing for a possible vaccine.
I think H1N1 was a great sort of warm up, if you will, to a pandemic vaccine and broad rollout. I think the A lot of systems were tested back in 2009, 2010 as an influenza vaccine was made very quickly and was rolled out within the same season. We probably don't have that same luxury here.
Immunization registries provide a record in every state. That's important for tracking when people need multiple doses of a vaccine. There is no federal policy that allows for the sharing of this information between states, creating an issue, for example, if someone works in one state but lives in another, or spends part of their year in one state and the other part in another. So the American Immunization Registry Association is working to improve information sharing between states ahead of a possible COVID-19 vaccine. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has a new goal: 2 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccines by the end of 2021. About half of those are expected to go to low and middle income countries. WHO says only a small portion of the world's population has natural immunity to the virus. The Minneapolis City Council unanimously passed the first steps in dismantling its police department. The proposal would change the city charter, allowing to instead create a Department of Community Safety and Violence Protection. The amendment says its director would focus on public health and restorative justice. There are still significant bureaucratic obstacles ahead. Then voters would make the final call in November. Where will the next coronavirus hotspot pop up? That's the question many researchers are trying to figure out. We're looking at the progress they've made as they work to help contain COVID-19.
Sandwiches. Get rallies delivered.
Scientists are working on a way to predict where COVID cases will spike next. As Chris Conti shows us, that would allow communities to make changes before the virus takes off.
As we shield ourselves in any way possible from the virus, there are some parts of the country handling social distancing better than others.
This is a public health problem. It's not a private health problem. It's a public health problem. So if I get sick, I could make 3 other people sick.
Dr. Bhaskar Chakravarti leads the Fletcher Institute for Business at Tufts University. He sat down with us to explain a new study he's been working on while the nation shut down. They analyzed mobility data from across the country.
We're also studying the United States as 50 different countries because each state, in many ways, is going in a somewhat different direction.
Here's what he and his team have discovered. The top 3 states who are practicing social distancing the most: New York, New Jersey, and Massachusetts. The worst: Nebraska, South Dakota, Arizona. What does that mean for the virus? Higher contagion rates where there's less social distancing happening.
In this post-pandemic moment, each state is going in a somewhat different direction as to how it's managing the pandemic.
In bigger cities with higher rates of infections, the study found that people responded better to restrictions because they could see the impact the coronavirus was having around them. Dr. Chakravarti hopes public health officials use his findings to make more uniform policies nationwide.
We have to have some consistent systems in place.
I can't breathe. Something else that worries Dr. Chakravarti, the way in which COVID and politics have suddenly collided.
This whole issue of COVID has become a political issue. So even the act of wearing a mask has become a political statement. You never want to mix politics with anything. You definitely don't want to mix politics with public health.
Please wear a mask.
A dangerous combination that the nation is very much still dealing with. In Boston, I'm Chris Conti reporting.
Ahead in our lineup, closures of government offices are leading to problems for people trying to get stimulus checks. Why IRS representatives working remotely is affecting your ability to get financial help.
Book, working for you.
Verizon, Ben & Jerry's, clothing company The North Face. Those are just a few major brands joining a campaign to pause advertising on Facebook. This is an effort we told you about last week, organized by the Anti-Defamation League and other civil rights groups. The idea is to get Facebook to take stronger action against hate speech.
For years, ADL and the other organizations have pushed Facebook to make its platform safer and more equitable for all the users, particularly for those who come from marginalized communities. And at this point, we haven't seen enough meaningful change.
Facebook responded to advertisers, laying out actions it has taken against hate speech and misinformation. The ADL responded with an open letter refuting some of Facebook's claims. The racial justice movement, energized following the death of George Floyd, has brought to light more systemic disparities, especially in criminal justice reform.
What we're saying is
We have to have a system that does not prejudice people due to their poverty. In reality, if you have enough money, you will always get out.
The Minnesota Freedom Fund started in 2016 as a small operation dedicated to ending cash bail systems. They helped bail out about 67 people last year. Following demonstrations set off by George Floyd's killing, donations started flooding in to help get protesters out of jail. Just since May, they've now bailed out at least 90 people. People all over the world, about 1 million individuals, have donated some $33 million.
Because we have criminalized everything. We arrest people for bullshit, and then we try to force it all through a system that would not be able to keep up, but for the fact that it leaves all of these people in cages and counts on the fact that people want to get home.
The Minnesota Freedom Fund says getting people out pre-trial now with COVID-19 is even more important. It says in the past, 1/3 of people it has bailed out have had their cases dismissed. People are less likely to plead guilty when they're not held in custody. They're also more likely to keep their job and even tend to get less harsh sentences if they're convicted. The Minnesota Freedom Fund says it intends to use the influx of donations to help arrested protesters. There are similar efforts in other states you can find through the National Bail Fund Network.
And after a period of uncertainty about the future of Indiana Beach, the 94-year-old attraction will open to the public tomorrow on Lake Schaefer, Monticello. Plans to close the park were announced in February by the previous owner, but then it was sold to a Chicago businessman in April. For right now, the park will operate at 50% capacity due to the pandemic, with reservations required using the park's online reservation system. This will continue through July 3rd. Kevin.
Right up to the 4th of July. It's going to be steamy right up to the 4th of July as well. You're looking from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway right over the top of Turn 2. You wouldn't even know it's there. Over the treetops to the capital city, where we'll be dry this evening. It will be hard to stay dry, though, if you're out doing anything physical, as you'll work up a sweat quickly because of that humidity. 92 in Lafayette, 1 degree cooler in Terre Haute. You're in the club in Bloomington at 90 degrees. Other spots, if you're missing it, not by much. Castleton's at 90, 88 in Martinsville. The next several nights, we always give so much attention to the high temperature, but low temperatures through most of the 7-day forecast will be at 70 degrees or a little warmer. We just never really cool off at night. Okay, the absence of cloud cover and any showers or thunderstorms right here, that's the dome of hot air that's pushed into central Indiana, and the boundary is to the north, and that's where the thunderstorms are developing on the leading edge of that warmer air. Eventually, a cold front will arrive, and that will start to sag the line of showers and thunderstorms to the south, but it's a dry evening now when we're likely to stay that way until the early overnight hours, first to the north. Well, this tells the story. The chance for rain tomorrow through Tuesday will remain about 60% or higher. That's what I mean by high on the scale as far as our temperatures tomorrow. Upper 70s to low 80s. It'll just depending on the timing of those thunderstorms, because obviously they'll develop during the heat of the day in addition to some morning thunderstorms that we have. There's the big picture for the weekend. Temperature doesn't change, rain chances don't change much, and the humidity doesn't change much either.
The IRS says it's issued more than 159 million payments in just over 2 months. $260 billion dispersed via direct deposit, paper check, and prepaid debit cards. Yet even today, there are countless Americans who, despite being eligible, believe they've fallen through the cracks. In New York State, Hannah Brando has no idea why she hasn't gotten a stimulus payment.
My sister and I, who both have not gotten the check yet, did our taxes this year and got our returns already, so it's very strange.
In California, Alexis Lopez also in limbo.
For most people, it was like, this person got it, this person got it, and I was like, well, maybe there's some delay with mine, no big deal.
And in Ohio, Karen Melroy also stuck in stimulus purgatory.
Received my refund via direct deposit. So there's no reason I can think of why I shouldn't have received one.
All of them get the same message when checking on the IRS website.
No payment status available.
I normally add a few more expletives to mine when I see it, but it's something to the effect of payment status not available.
It turns out they're not alone. Those 4 words are exasperating countless Americans otherwise eligible who have not been paid and can't get answers as to why.
The IRS obviously was very rushed and Even when the government takes a year and a half to do a computer system, there are problems with it.
In May, the IRS added 3,500 telephone representatives to help with problems, but most can only provide general information.
So I found this 9-step guide of how to get a human on the phone at the IRS. I did it twice and was hit a dead end.
Thank you for calling the Internal Revenue Service office. Due to COVID-19 or the coronavirus, this office is temporarily closed until further notice.
Because IRS offices remain closed due to the pandemic, the agency tells us that call center agents are working from home. That means they don't have access to secure personal information specific to each case.
This was designed poorly, obviously, because it doesn't tell you which of those things happen. And if it is a glitch, it doesn't tell you what kind of a glitch.
The IRS is doing a phased reopening at key processing sites and call centers. In a statement, they say some employees have returned to work in Kentucky, Texas, and Utah. In careful accordance with state and local guidelines, IRS employees are returning to work in Georgia, Tennessee, Missouri, Michigan, and by the end of June, in Indiana, Ohio, California, Oregon, and Puerto Rico. But if you can't get your issue resolved by the end of the year, you may have to claim your unpaid stimulus assistance on next year's return as a credit.
That doesn't help me today.
A sentiment many share as they struggle to rebound financially from the pandemic. The agency says for case-specific information, the appropriate number to call remains 800-829-1040. Otherwise, you could call your local IRS office and even set up a face-to-face meeting once they reopen. Well, there are now multiple warnings about contact tracing scams. Contact tracing is when a health representative calls someone after a positive COVID test or to let them know they have come into contact with someone who has tested positive. The CDC says there are about 28,000 contact tracers, and we need about 100,000. Now, scam artists are pretending to be contact tracers, sending emails and text messages with malicious links.
Basically, the body of the message will say something like, you've come into contact with somebody who has COVID-19. You're to self-quarantine for 2 weeks. Here's a link or here's a file that you need to open to get further information.
A real contact tracer will never email or text a link. They will never ask for a credit card or social security number. You could get a legitimate text or email from a contact tracing effort. The person will identify themselves from a local health department and ask you to confirm your basic personal and health information. Another way to know if a person is truly a contact tracer, they typically follow a script, which you can find online. Scams like these have increased the importance of protecting your personal information.
As we move beyond the work from home initiative to what I believe will be the work from anywhere initiative, mobile security, endpoint security will all be a very fundamental part of our security platform that we're required to have with us.
Checkpoint Cybersecurity's engineer says they're also seeing malicious sites being created around the Black Lives Matter movement. Well, it's becoming a growing issue nationwide. People lighting off fireworks. What experts say could be behind this trend.